Good morning. How you doing today? I am so glad that you came for story time today. We have Frances sitting in my lap. I do not know what she has going on this morning. When I picked her up from her little bed, she had a little something on, so we'll have to see what that's all about. And we have a great story today. This is called Mr. Tanin's Ties, and it's written by Marianne Leffler. And it's a really great story. Guess what it's going to be about? Dolphins? I don't think so. Elephants? I don't think so. Ties, maybe? And here's a dedication. And in books, whether they're chapter books or picture books, if you're the author, you can put a dedication in to somebody who's special to you. And this one says, to Mr. Tanin, crazy tie wearer and the principal of Lyndhurst Elementary School in Saugus, Massachusetts. And it's from MCL. So she wrote it to a special principal that must wear crazy ties. So that's cool. Mr. Tanin is the principal of Lyndhurst Elementary School. All the children love him, and they also love his ties. Every morning as the children enter school, they check out Mr. Tanin's ties. It was a good way to start the day. Mr. Tanin had quite a tie collection. Funny ties, crazy ties, holiday ties, ties that play music, and even ties that would light up. He also has a big collection of tourist ties. Anytime the students go on a trip, they bring home ties for Mr. Tanin. His office is bulging with ties. And that would be very fun. We might have to get Dr. Fradley going on something like this. Mr. Kolbe used to have a lot of ties when he was a principal, but not as many as this guy has, I don't think. He changes his tie several times a day, depending on his mood, the weather, or what's for lunch in the cafeteria. On Frankfurter Day, he always puts on his hot dog tie. No one will know if I get mustard on it, he said. If the weather suddenly changes, so does his tie. If he's wearing his umbrella tie, you know it's going to be raining before you go outside. And for official duties, he always wears his red, white, and blue tie with yellow stars. If you were going to take a guess about Mr. Tanin's personality, would you think he's kind of a dull, drab guy? I don't think so. I think from his actions and for how many ties he has and how many times a day he changes them, he seems to me like he would be a really fun guy to be around, really fun principal to have. One day, Mr. Tanin had an important meeting with Mr. Apple at the school department. Everyone in town called Mr. Apple Mr. Crab Apple because, of course, he was grouchy and he never smiled. And of course, Mr. Tanin wore the appropriate tie. And look, he wore one with apples on it for Mr. Apple. Mr. Tanin, Mr. Apple began, you are a fine principal, but there's one thing that concerns me. Well, what's that? Said Mr. Tanin. Education is a serious business, said Mr. Apple. Well, absolutely, agreed Mr. Tanin. You are a role model for your students, said Mr. Apple. Mr. Tanin nodded. Therefore, you should look proper at all times. Mr. Apple pointed to Mr. Tanin's tie, and that is not proper. He handed Mr. Tanin a plain blue tie. This is. From now on, Mr. Tanin, keep your silly ties in your closet. You are to wear only blue ties. Mr. Tanin was shocked. No sports ties with soccer balls? No. No tourist ties with palm trees and pink flamingos? No, Mr. Tanin. No light-up tree ties at Christmas? No, Mr. Tanin. Blue. Just blue. Well, the next day Mr. Tanin greeted all the children as usual, but Something was not right. Mr. Tanin, your tie, it's just plain blue, said Alex. Mr. Tanin just felt suddenly plain blue. He sighed. Oh, sorry, kids. It's just proper blue from now on. Strict orders from Mr. Apple. Boring, said Carlos. How are we going to know the weather, asked Olivia. Or what we're having for lunch, asked Kaylee. Mr. Tanin shrugged sadly. Mr. Tanin didn't feel like talking to anyone all morning. At lunch, he wished he had his hot dog tie on because look, he squirted mustard on it. Now you can see it. When the second grade celebrated Kristen's birthday, he couldn't wear his special tie that played Happy Birthday to You. Alex was worried. Mr. Tanin's just not the same, he thought. Well, early Monday morning, the school secretary phoned Mr. Apple. Sir, Mr. Tanin just called in sick. He's going to be out all week with the blues. You'll have to come into Lyndhurst School and fill in as our principal. Well, the children were really surprised to see Mr. Apple greet them at the door. I will be your principal for the week, he snapped. Let's have straight lines, no talking, no running. Oh, I miss Mr. Tanin already, whispered Alex. Well, that afternoon, Mr. Apple even made recess rules. No playing on the wet grass, he yelled. You'll track mud into the school. Recess was no fun. The kids were happy when the bell rang, and when they were filing in, they saw Mr. Apple climbing a tree. What's he doing up there? Spying on us, said Kaylee. I can't believe it. He's bird watching, said Olivia. He actually looks happy up there, said Carlo. That gave Alex an idea. On Tuesday, Alex gave Mr. Apple a tie with birds on it. Thank you, Alex, but that's not quite my style. When he was alone, though, Mr. Apple stared at the tie. Cardinals. Well, they are my favorite bird, he thought. He held the tie up close in his plain gray suit. He couldn't help but try it on. After school, Mr. Apple wore his new tie to the grocery store. Hello, Mr. Apple, said the cashier, Miss Sweet. Well, good day, mumbled Mr. Apple. Lovely tie, commented Miss Sweet. You must like birds. I'm crazy about cats. Mr. Apple smiled a little. Are you sensing a little bit of a change in Mr. Apple? Well, on Wednesday, Mr. Apple picked up his mail, and then he sat down at Mr. Tanin's desk to work, but he just couldn't concentrate. He opened Mr. Tanin's closet and began searching through his ties. He found just what he was looking for. Look. A little kitty tie. That afternoon, he went to the grocery store again, and he got Mrs. Sweet's checkout line. Well, Mr. Apple, that is a charming tie. Mr. Apple and Miss Sweet chatted for a long time. So he went out and picked out a tie just for Miss Sweet. On Thursday afternoon, Mr. Apple thumbed through Mr. Tanin's ties again. This time he heard music. It was coming from the tie. Mr. Apple headed back to the grocery store. When he got to the register, he pressed the tie and it played, let me call you, sweetheart. Mr. Apple, I never knew you could be so delightful, said Miss Sweet. Mr. Apple handed Miss Sweet a rose. Will you have dinner with me tonight? Oh, I would love to, Mr. Apple. Get my tune right on that. Let me call you sweetheart. I think Mr. Apple has a little crush on Miss Sweet. Well, on Friday morning, Mr. Apple greeted the children wearing a tie with red hearts. Isn't that Mr. Tannen's Valentine tie? Asked Alex. Mr. Apple grinned. Well, I don't think he'd mind if I borrowed it. Do you? He won't mind, shouted all the kids. And look at Mr. Apple's face. He doesn't look like he has that grouchy face anymore. And he's wearing a tie with hearts on it, and it's not even Valentine's Day. Where do you think he's going? What's your prediction? My head is telling me straight to the grocery store to see Miss Sweet. Is that what you're thinking? Well, on Monday, Mr. Tanin came back to school. Mr. Apple was waiting at the door. That tie, Mr. Tanin, grumbled Mr. Apple. Oh, I'm sorry, sir. I got a stain on it. Mustard, apologized Mr. Tanin. Well, it's a good thing I bought you another one, said Mr. Apple. He handed Mr. Tanin a box. What color do you think it's going to be? Plain blue? Mr. Tanin sighed and opened the lid. A big smile spread across his face, which leads me to believe it's not blue. It's just your kind of blue, said Mr. Apple. Then Mr. Apple gave him a shopping bag filled with letters. The kids have been writing letters all week. They want their principal back, and so do I. Thank you, Mr. Apple. One more thing, said Mr. Apple shyly. Could you lend me the wedding bells tie? I have an important date tonight. Oh my gosh. Look at his tie. He got him a You're Number One tie. I think Mr. Apple has had a change. Lots of times characters in a story make a change from the beginning to the end. One of the important characters. I think he's had a change of heart for sure. I think he's changed his mind about Mr. Tanin and about his ties and how much fun they could be. And I think he's changed his attitude. So, and then the story turns out a whole different way than you think. Wedding bells, though, that's really something. Uh-oh. Look what happened. Mr. Apple and Miss Sweet got married. And look at the tie Mr. Tanin's wearing. Oh, well, that is truly a happy ending. I love books with a happy ending. That was a fun book. Well, Francis is here, and you're going to see what I'm talking about by having something unusual on. Francis, are you awake? Oh my gosh, your head is twisted. Did I choke you? Yeah, just a little bit. Are you all right? Pat you on the back a little bit. Oh, thank you, Mrs. Kolbe. Well, I see that you have a little something on, and it is not your pajamas. I would never wear my pajamas with the kids. How embarrassing that would be. Well, that could be a little bit embarrassing. I don't wear my pajamas with the kids either. I hope not. That would be super embarrassing if you wore your pajamas. Well, what is this? Well, I looked at the book you were going to be reading, and I put on my tie. Ooh, now that is a beautiful tie. You want to see it up close? All right, well, you can show them. It's purple and blue. Yep. I think it used to be one of Mr. Kolbe's ties. Well, Mr. Kolbe used to have a lot of ties. So when he was a principal, he had Christmas ties and Valentine ties and St. Patrick's Day ties. Thanks for bopping along with me. Well, I wore my tie for a very special reason. Well, why did you wear it? Well, I was listening to the poems you were doing. You were? Yep. And I've been practicing in the mirror, and I know one of them. And it has to have a tie to wear. Well, what one is it? It's a little bit embarrassing. What is it? It's called Something's Missing. Oh, yeah. I don't know if you've been watching our poetry shows, But we've been learning poems, some Shel Silverstein fun poems, and acting them out and dressing up. Yep, and dressing up, which is I bet we use this time when we do the poems. Yeah, and I saw Toby do it. It was so funny. I was laughing in my shell. Well, yes, this is one of our props, but we do poetry and props, and if you have not watched it, it is a lot of fun. We've been acting out poems and learning one or two new poems each week as we go along, and obviously you have been listening. I didn't know that. Sometimes Toby sits in here because he likes to practice. Yeah, but I can hear you do it, and I love them. They crack me up. There are some really funny poems, so if you haven't done that before, you might want to hop on board. And you can even go back in the list and start at the beginning and come along with us, because we've been learning one or two poems a week, and then the next week we add a couple more in, but it's super fun. Yeah, I really love it. I'm going to do one for you today. Oh, you're actually going to perform one? Yeah. Maybe Mrs. Choate will have me on, and I can do it on the news. Well, I know Miss Choate's having some people come on for poetry. If they want to, she might even have you on. I know it. I'm really good at it. All right, well, can we hear it? Yeah. Yeah, it's going to be fun. All right, here we go. Something's missing. I remember I put on my socks. I remember I put on my shoes. Yep, there they are. I remember I put on my tie that was painted in beautiful purples and blues. I remember I put on my coat to look perfectly grand at the dance. Yet, I feel there is something I may have forgot. What is it? What is it? And if you could see her, it's her pants. Yep. Isn't that so funny? That is kind of funny. And when we do it on stage, well, when Mrs. Kolbe does it on stage, I wear a really long coat, so it looks like I don't have any pants on. So it is funny when you do it. And you're funny because you don't have any socks or shoes. I know it. I would really like to wear socks and shoes sometime. Well, we could put socks on your feelers, antlers. Well, we could put them on your feelers. We've talked about this. Antlers. We have talked about it, but that's okay. But you don't have any socks, you don't have any shoes, but you do have a tie painted in beautiful purples and blues. And you have a beautiful coat. And we talk about in poetry how you don't actually have to have the props. Yeah, if you don't have them, you can just make people believe you have them when you use your voice and your hands. And you had a really good voice with that. Sometimes poems are boring when you just do them and they kind of gallop along. Yeah, that's really boring. But you had a lot of voice, and when we do poems, we want to be storytellers, don't we? Yeah, I like to tell stories. Well, you want to try it again for them? Let's really concentrate this time and listen to her voice when she does it. Because if you did it a boring way, do it the boring way. I remember I put on my socks. I remember I put on my shoes. I remember I put on my tie that was painted in beautiful purples and blues. Boring. You better believe it. That was so boring. All right, you want to try it for him the right way? Yep. Let me get my voice ready. My name is Frances, and I'm going to be performing Something's Missing. I remember I put on my socks. I remember I put on my shoes. I remember I put on my tie that was painted in beautiful purples and blues. I'll hold it out for you. I remember I put on my coat to look perfectly grand at the dance. Yet, I feel there is something I may have forgot. What is it? What is it? Ugh. And then nobody says anything, but all the kids in the room usually say what? Your pants! They do say usually your pants. Well, I'm so glad that you've been participating and listening to poetry. I didn't know that. Yep, every day. And that you came on today to do a poem for the kids. Wasn't that great? Give her a hand. Everybody clap. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you, everyone. Thank you. Thank you so much. Okay, that's probably good. Well, we're going to tell the kids goodbye because they have lots to do. I don't want to go. I know. But you might have to. Can I just lay here? You can lay here if you want to. I like it. Are you going to tell the kids goodbye? Goodbye. Well, don't you think you should get up and tell them goodbye? No. Goodbye. Bye. All right. Well, have a really great day today. Francis is going to snuggle in. It is kind of a cloudy day here for us. I don't know on the day that you hear it if it is for you, but that's okay. So we will see you next time, tomorrow, hopefully. I hope you're tuning in every day. And if you haven't tuned into poetry, jump on board, go back a ways, get on the Rowlett site, and you can find them and have a whole lot of fun with us. Okay, see you tomorrow. Bye. Bye.